Hi everyone, Christy here from Master One Thing. Today we have the honor to have the world's leading rapamycin researcher Mikhail Blagosklonny as our guest in the podcast. Mikhail has a long background in cancer research, and one important discovery he made around 2000 was that rapamycin slowed down senescent cancer cells in different ways. After that, step by step, his interest in the longevity field increased, and he developed a very interesting theory of aging, which we are going to talk about in this podcast. He has made a huge contribution in moving the rapamycin field forward, and his research papers has impacted many people. For example, the rapamycin physician Alan Green, who, thanks to this paper, took the decision in 2017 to start prescribing rapamycin off-label. Today, Alan Green has the biggest clinical experience in the area with more than 1,200 patients. And a lot of other physicians has after that also taken these steps forward. And one of those are, for example, the physician Peter Attia. So it's a really big honor to have the opportunity to talk to Mikhail today, because he's not only thinking outside the box, he is also going outside the box. So, Misha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. You made me blush so much flattering words about me. And, yes. And before talking about rapamycin, I need to tell something briefly. I was diagnosed with lung cancer and multiple metastases in my brain. This is why my speech is slightly impaired. I revealed this publicly 2 months ago because I'm developing curative treatment of such metastatic diseases. And so far it worked well for me. I couldn't speak in January, and I'm writing this so it served not only to me as a patient, but for all other patients. This is my mission now. And I'm very happy right now that I can do it. So my current interest, not rapamycin, but cure of cancer. But of course, we want to hear about rapamycin right now. And I just need to say that some people ask me, why rapamycin didn't prevent my cancer? Yes, it didn't prevent, but it delayed it by many years because initial mass in my lung was determined in 1991, 32 years ago, and it wasn't paid attention. I denied this, everybody denied, and only after 40 years I have clinical presentation, so it's obviously delayed. And recently I published a paper, Cancer Prevention with Rapamycin. It shows that it's always delayed, but not prevent completely. Unless you die from another cause, it will be like prevention. So I will return to this topic at the end if you want.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that in the end, and rapamycin's preventive effect on cancer and things like that, because I think that is a really big interest for many people. So I think you can provide lots of good information in that area. But it was really tough to hear what you're going through, and I hope you really find the key to solve these things you're going through. And I know you're a fighter, Misha, and not a person who easy gives up things. And if there is something I or someone else can do, just let us know, and we will try to help you fight this thing as good as
Many
possible.
doctors and I participate in developing this treatment, which I would say cutting edge. I will be treated like no one else before. It's very experimental. And I am writing about this, so you could read update on this story on my blog, Blagosklonny blog.
Yeah. I will put links to your blog and things like that in the description so that people can find your blog, because there are lots of good information there also on rapamycin.
Usually, in the past, I never used blog. I just published articles, but this is project in progress. It's everyday change. I want to be able to describe it from personal perspective. It will be very unusual when patient himself writes as his own doctor. So I am both.
One place we can start this conversation, if we go back in time in your life, and if we look at your theory, which you developed in the beginning of 2000, can you explain what the hyperfunction theory is, and how it was started and evolved?
Yes. It started not like theory of aging. I was working with cell culture, cancer cells, and we noticed that when cell cycle of these cells is arrested, so cells stop proliferating, they become senescent because cell proliferation finished, but cell growth in size continued. It was like quasi program. Quasi is not real program. And pathway that causes growth in size is mTOR pathway, target of rapamycin. So next step, we added rapamycin to arrested cells when they become senescent. In this case, senescent didn't develop. So rapamycin block cell senescent. And in small scale, this is model of organism aging, because when growth is finished, but driving force for growth remains, then instead of real growth, cell undergoes senescence. It's a good analogy to organism when development is finished, but all processes that drives development and growth, reproduction system remain active. They push, but now not growth, but diseases. Very simple example, prostate enlargement, for example, it's continuation to growth in development. Prostate after development finished continues to grow. It's no need for that. It's double in size every 8 years. So eventually, all men will have prostate enlargement, of course, some with clinical presentation, most.
Is it not also like the nose and the ears get also bigger when we get older?
Yes, but it's not so dramatic, of course, because it was no program specifically to enlarge nose, like to enlarge prostate during puberty. And it's related to all other diseases. And even if you talk about cancer, this is also hyperfunction because cancer is increase in mass, proliferation, it's more, and so many benign tumors. Atherosclerosis plaque is also hypertrophic hyperplasia of cells. Hypertension, it's continuation of development growth because blood pressure is lower in inwards, then increase in childhood, it continue increase, and some people become hypertension, hyperlipidemia, hyperinsulinemia, hyperglycemia, and so on, based on systemic levels. So, but word hyper not necessary. It could be unchanged. I have an analogy with the car. Maybe I know that Chris likes this analogy.
Can you explain the car metaphor? Because I think that explains quite good the theory behind it.
Yeah, I actually published it in 2009, and it's all my initial publications was extremely difficult to publish. So I compared agent with speeding car without brakes. Traditional analogy of this time was rusting car because it was thought that aging is caused by free radicals, so like slow rusting. And in my analogy, rusting of the car, of course, may happen, but it's very slow. And damage happens when, for example, car is moving on highway and has no brakes, and then it exits on small street at the same speed, not higher, but the same, like on highway, and then on driveway, and of course it will be destroyed in accident. So damage in this case from rusting never comes. And in this analogy, hyperfunction not necessarily increase. it could be the same, like speed on highway, or even less, but in any case, more than optimal on driveway.
And the thing with the speed, just to clarify that when we get born to this life, then the speed of the car is starting, because we need the speed to develop as humans. But the problem is that this growth continues even after when we don't need it anymore. And that is a big problem which this theory of aging points at.
Yes. So, of course, it's not literal growth which continues, but driving force for growth, mTOR, continue to be active. It's very important to keep it active in childhood during growth. Otherwise, animal or humans will not grow. And if mTOR is inhibited in embryogenesis, it's lethal. So early in life, it's extremely necessary. But then it's not switched off because nature didn't need it to switch it off. And the way switch it off is rapamycin, which should not be taken in childhood. Well, in some diseases it's necessary, but for longevity purposes. And after development is finished, then it could be turned off a little bit.
And the thing also, just to clarify, there is that hyperfunction drives age-related diseases.
Well, it's more than correct because just yesterday my last paper on this topic was published, and I reevaluate hyperfunction theory. I eliminated aging at all. So you will be surprised there is no aging. The age-related diseases and something which we don't call diseases like wrinkles. It doesn't matter. All these diseases and benign condition is aging. But without them, there is nothing left. It's like I compare the bouquet of flowers. If you take every flower, it's disease, nothing left. So development directly drives age-related diseases. It's not like I imagined 20 years ago. It drives aging, and aging drives disease. I just told with prostate enlargement. I just have no time to go to each particular disease, how it started developing in development. For example, atherosclerosis, few signs already could be detected in 6-year-old children.
And if we look at this theory, because it gives good way of thinking about the longevity area, you have used this theory to predict things also. That's a really powerful thing when you have a theory which you can predict things that should work and not work. What was the thing that you predicted in the early 2000s?
First, I started predicting what medications could slow down aging. I will still use the word aging, although I just told it just set of all diseases. It's very convenient to use this word which describe all diseases. So what would slow down aging? Because we want to live longer. So this would my main interest in prediction. So the theory predicted that rapamycin will slow down aging. Not only rapamycin, but inhibitors of other growth promoting pathway, such as MAP pathway. But I emphasized 20 years ago that only rapamycin is available now, like drug permitted for human use that has trivial side effects. So I concentrated on rapamycin, although I mentioned other potential inhibitors. So then it was confirmed independently, of course, in 3 years in mice, then other animals. Surprisingly for me was that it worked extended lifespan in mice, even if used at old age. Because I mostly think that aging need to be slowed down earlier to prevent development of disease. Because let's say when something is broken already, rapamycin will help. For example, osteoporosis. It's caused by increased function of osteoclast. And rapamycin can help decreasing their function. But when bone is broken already, broken hip, very common in elderly, it's too late to use rapamycin to fix it.
I had an interview with Dr. Alan Green, and one thing he pointed out from his clinical experience was that rapamycin worked best on the healthy people. And one reason for that it's probably because of the thing you pointed out, that rapamycin prevents age-related diseases. It's not that good at curing age-related diseases and broken things.
You are right. But once again, I was surprised that it works better than I expected, because Dr. Green at first tried rapamycin himself, and he already had diseases and partially reversed that. So this part I initially didn't expect that it would help at any age. But what, in contrast, I was very optimistic. I was at the beginning thinking that it could potentially extend lifespan indefinitely. This is my main paper in 2006 was named Aging and Immortality. And this will not happen, of course. And in mice, it's extend lifespan 20%, which is very good, of course. Mice dies the same age-related diseases like without rapamycin, but later. So disease not stopped completely, but delayed. I name one of my articles that rapamycin slows down time, and because it's affect many processes, making them slower.
That goes good aligned with the car metaphor, that slowing down the speed of the car. And that way we slow down also the age-related diseases.
You're right. So it's slowing down and not completely prevention. And more and more data that rapamycin slow down aging, extend lifespan in diverse organisms, even in the most simple organism.
Cell cultures and worms.
Yeah, and Hydra. It's interesting that it was publication in which rapamycin extend lifespan of this organism, but authors didn't make any point on that because they were doing for another reason this experiment. And it was other publications in which authors didn't study aging at all, and accidentally or not, they have these results. For example, first result in my mind, which showed extension of lifespan of rapamycin, was in 2007. Never noticed because it was done in mice in early in life. This mice was given cigarettes to smoke, and they all develop cancer when they become old. So rapamycin greatly delayed this, and it looked like prevention, but it was just delaying. And it was done in cancer research, not in aging research. This is why no one aging research knows this paper that such experiments on longevity started later.
If we go back to the hyperfunction theory, there is one concept that I think is quite interesting. It's hormesis, that the body gets stronger through the right amount of stress. Does that concept of hormesis fit with the hyperfunction theory, or is it more with some other theory?
Well, I published about this. Actually, I published about everything several times. On rapamycin and aging, I have 15 experimental papers and 150 theoretical. So hormesis could be several different phenomena. So it's not exactly one process. So it's difficult to say in general. And one forms of hormesis related to hyperfunction theory, other not necessary, like train to survive bad conditions. It's unrelated because not everything related to mTOR in medicine. And another example which fit hyperfunction theory well is calorie restriction and fasting. But I don't mention it now for two reasons. First, it was known before hyperfunction theory. It provided explanation that it might act via mTOR, and in part it does. But explanation is not so interesting, like prediction of unknown phenomena like rapamycin. And second, fasting, for example, doesn't inhibit mTOR in old animals, so only in young. So it cannot substitute for rapamycin, but it can be combined because they only one pathway is the same, overlapping, but some other not. And also combining rapamycin with very popular right now, Acarbose. But on the other hand, this could be substituted by low carb diet, for example. So it's a very interesting topic, not developed or combination rapamycin with different diets.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Acarbose is, as Misha said, a glucose regulator that it put down the levels of glucose as low carb diet or a ketogenic diet. And if I interpret it correctly, you see that there can be interesting combination between these and rapamycin.
Right. Second, very interesting for rapamycin users, combination with physical exercise. So when I was using rapamycin myself, I didn't think of any particular disease. I mostly was oriented how I feel and how I look, because when I was young, I never exercised and was taking rapamycin, and I developed very nice fitness. I posted some comparison photos before and after on my Twitter on the beach. So I looked better. A combination with physical exercise, I think, very important for myself.
If we take the calorie restriction, fasting, and rapamycin, and low carb diet, those are things that put the brake on the car to slow down the speed of the car. Does exercise slow down the speed of the car also?
No, I don't think uh, it's difficult question. What we know, that sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass, happens in old people. And surprisingly, it's overwhelming evidence that rapamycin helps to preserve muscle. But on the other hand, it helps to preserve because muscle cells don't die. This is what rapamycin doing. But of course, it's decrease hypertrophy of muscle cells because it's what rapamycin does, decrease growth. So in this case, to have even more strong effect to prevent muscle loss, it's good to combine physical exercise and rapamycin. I'm not telling that it will slow down this combination, for example, prostate enlargement, but it will slow down loss of muscle, which is important for quality of life. We not only think about longevity, but also quality of life.
Yeah. And it can also increase glucose tolerance so that the glucose that comes in goes to the muscle. So
Right. I am not, of course, expert in physical exercise at all. I was doing this for myself. I like to get compliments from people that I look better.
And one thing that I think many are a little bit struggling around is that is there any good way for us to know if we push ourselves too much in slowing down the speed of the car? Is there any sweet spot of mTOR inhibition and mTOR activation? Uh, what is the optimal speed of the car when we get older?
Right. Well, again, I was surprised when experiments in mice increasingly showing that high dose of rapamycin, the longer lifespan. It may be on one instance, it was too high dose was less effective than slightly low dose. But in all cases, more rapamycin, the better.
If I translate it to the car metaphor, this means that the slower the car goes, the better, almost.
Right? It fits well, this metaphor. But initially, before experiments, I expected that it should be probably a low dose of rapamycin, the most optimal. So right now, it's difficult to say because so far in all animals, high dose the better. I'm talking, of course, not when rapamycin used in development. When it was after, for example, birth of mice, its extend lifespan, but these mice very weak, small, and they would die in the wild. Only in laboratory they survive and then live longer. So about doses,
Yeah, we can go a little bit deeper to the dose a little bit later because that is super interesting area to dig deeper on. But I have one question before we go a little bit deeper in the topic, and it's about the slowing of the car again here. If we look at centenarians, do we know how they have slowed down the speed of the car? Is it due to mTOR inhibition, or is it something else that has made them lived over 100 years? Do you have any thoughts on that?
it didn't really studied well. I think it's in part through mTOR inhibition natural. And what is important to notice that they live longer because they develop diseases later. This is crucial. No one had diseases before 100 years. So we can say they age slowly or they have slow development of diseases.
And that fits very good with hyperfunction theory.
Yeah. And this view that aging is summary of all disease, but everyone, eventually, even at age 120, dies from diseases. Although on death certificate it could be said old age, but when autopsy was performed, it always diseases. So they just delayed, and this is how they live longer. And this is again, we can delay but not prevent completely. If we could prevent completely, we would live forever. But it could be then different reasons, of course, of death and unrelated to hypertension.
And I think you mentioned that in some paper that if we solve the age-related disease problem, then it can be like the rust on the car gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and after a while the car will totally break.
Because accumulation of damages, which happens by damaging factors, they of course happen, but they are not life limiting because diseases kill us early. And if difference in 1 second between them two processes, you cannot extend lifespan acting on slower process, even it's slightly slower. About damage, I don't want to be misunderstood that damage not part of hyperfunction theory. In contrast, it's part. Hyperfunction damage organism, damage organs, systems, and so on. Like myocardial infarction is damage, but it's caused by initial hyperfunction. But when damage happens, it's loss of function after that. But difference with classic theory that aging is caused by molecular damage, that it's not molecular damage, it's damage of entire heart by atherosclerosis, hypertension, then myocardial infarction, and it's not slowly accumulate damage in every cell and then we suddenly have infarction. Not at all. It's through hyperfunctional disease like atherosclerosis. But this molecular damage accumulates, of course. It's just not life limiting. So use of antioxidants will not extend lifespan. If we stop aging, for example, mTOR-driven aging, then we will live longer and maybe die from free radicals. But right now, it's not important. Of course, we can develop mice which has no protection against molecular damage. In this case, artificially, this cause become life limiting. Of course, it's possible. We can just take radiation and just kill animal, but it doesn't mean that this is cause of normal aging.
Yeah, that's very interesting thing. One of my favorite quotes from you that I saw the first time was on the Rapamycin Pearl trial web page. And it was if rapamycin mechanism of action does not slow down aging, then everything we know about biologic is wrong. Do you still have this view?
Yeah, it was before actually my publications. Uh, the most comprehensive paper in 2006, Aging and Mortality, which present different view on aging, like quasi-program, pseudo-program of development driven by mTOR, which specified that we can start treatment to humans right away. Everything is known already. So I had great problem to publish. I thought it's very important. And some people who read it before publication, they were really impressed. I was impressed myself, actually. So I was young and ambitious. Of course, I said to nature, science, cell, and other. And to my surprise, nature rejected it immediately, and they said that its topic not enough interest for wide readership of nature. Immortality, not enough interest. So, but I decided the editors of these journals don't understand. Then I wrote this sentence that you just cited, that if this paper is wrong, then everything in biology must be wrong, because I put all reasons for my conclusions. So if I am wrong, then all facts that you used should be wrong. But it didn't change much. Yeah. About the car analogy, it was also rejected. All papers were rejected several times before from Cell and in 2 days. And editor, I don't want to name this person, he is well known. He wrote that the journal is too narrow to papers about cars.
Okay. Oh, if we look at the research and trials, Misha, is it some research or trial that you especially think should be done on rapamycin that are missing today?
What is missing? You see, clinical trials with rapamycin in healthy people is started, and they are looking for side effects. I think this is mistake, because they should be looking for therapeutic effects, because side effects was studied for even before 1999 when FDA approved rapamycin is safe. After that, rapamycin analog everolimus was studied in thousands studies for different applications. So continue studying minimal side effects counterproductive in this situation, because we really want to know, can we extend lifespan in humans? Shouldn't be exceptions from all animals. We just should know optimal use of medicine. And I think it should be sort of disease oriented. It should be no such simple that every man takes the same amount.
If we look at how such a trial could look like, should it use, for example, biological clocks, or look at special biomarkers, or what do you think could be a good thing to check for the therapeutic effects?
Yeah, it's too complex question you for short presentation, but because we should make sure that we delay age-related diseases.
Yeah, so the trials should circle around how the age-related diseases are slowed down, and if rapamycin can slow down age-related diseases or not. So that is the main
Right.
point of those trials.
Right.
Yeah, good, good.
Maybe I was a little bit harsh saying that we should not do studies on just stating side effects, because for sure it will no side effects. Studies already several confirmed this. No one pay attention to these studies much. It's important because there's misconception that rapamycin is dangerous. Many scientists develop alternative treatments which doesn't work yet. So their reasoning is goes like that. Rapamycin is gold standard, but it's dangerous to be used in humans. For that reason, I am studying different modification, for example, of rapamycin, which will be as good as rapamycin, but without side effects.
So if we look at, for example, Dr. Alan Green, he says that there can be a slight increase in bacterial infection. Is that something you agree on, or?
Dr. Green is a revolutionary doctor who started this bold project given rapamycin to patients, not only to himself. So he must be very careful. Even if it's theoretical possibility that bacterial infection will be increased, he should warn this. But on the other hand, some calculations use of antibiotics by people not taking rapamycin, taking rapamycin very similar, because infections minor so often in all of us, including teeth infections, for example. So, of course, it will happen in people taking rapamycin as well. But this is not main concern, for example, in organ transplant patients that despite they are very sick and have a lot of infections regardless of the rapamycin. What studies shown, including Cumberland study, I was co-author of this. It was just increase in mouth sores. I can't recall other side effects reported by us and by just general population.
I remember there were some also opposite positive effects, like less stomach pains or something like that in the rapamycin group, which was very interesting.
Right. It's interesting that it was 20 years old study in healthy volunteers long before aging projects. By the way, we just need to read these millions of studies done for other reasons. And they were asked for side effects of rapamycin. One of them, fatigue, asthenia. So 30% of those who took rapamycin, it was single very high dose, complained on fatigue and asthenia. It's the same. But it was high, 30%. But 50% those who didn't take rapamycin also complained of fatigue and asthenia. So placebo group had more complaints. But if we forget about placebo group, we would say, oh, 1/3 of people who took rapamycin single dose complain.
One thing that I think is interesting, you wrote some papers a while ago about pseudo-diabetes, and that rapamycin can lead to slight increase in glucose level or insulin resistance. And there are like two camps here. One camp that says that it's no problem, it's a therapeutic effect, and the other says that it's not a good thing. Can you explain a little bit around that, Misha, your thoughts?
Now, I regret that I was writing these papers.
Okay, yeah.
Because it was waste of time, actually, because I was arguing with people who wanted funds to develop better rapamycin. These people said this is a problem. They worked in mice and showed that mice live longer, but develop insulin resistance, which later was shown not to be confirmed, and glucose intolerance. But they live longer this mice. So I consider it therapeutic effect of no side. Because 200 years ago, Claude Bernard showed, and he called it pseudo-diabetes, when a dog and rats, rabbits in his experiment, was fasted for 2-3 days and then were given food containing glucose. This glucose went to the urine, which is definition of word diabetes. Because when during fasting there is glucose intolerance, because tissue should not use glucose, it should go to the brain only. So rapamycin may do the same in some laboratory animals, develop glucose intolerance. But in contrast to fasting, these animals continue to eat while having glucose intolerance due to rapamycin. They can develop increase slight glucose level.
And can this be a reason why, for example, low carb diet and Acarbose can be a good combination?
Yes, exactly. Because in this case, it will be no increase in glucose, like during fasting, no increase in glucose because people don't eat the glucose during fasting by definition. But after they eat, the glucose go to the urine because body has defense during fasting to use glucose. It should just be for the brain. And when you suddenly eat after fasting, it goes very high, not very high, high.
That is very interesting. And it's good aligned also with the intervention testing program, which showed that the rapamycin and Acarbose combined lead to synergistic effects, which is
Right.
very, very interesting thing. I know also you have talked about the lipids thing. If the ITP should, for example, test a combination with rapamycin and statin or something like that, do you think that will also lead to synergistic effects, or what's your thought on that?
Probably. Yes, it should be tested. But I analyzed, for example, data on fasting and ketogenic diet. Lipids can go up also during this condition. Is it bad or good? I don't know. In rabbits and mice, rapamycin delay atherosclerosis. I will say that it delays also atherosclerosis in humans. And at the same time, level of lipids go up. So these old papers, they pointed that such contradiction, lipids go up and atherosclerosis less. Yes, it could be actually explained because rapamycin increased levels of lipids due to lipolysis, and that lipids don't go inside tissues, including atherosclerotic plaque. So they can't in the blood because they are not used by tissues. So it's maybe positive. It should be also studied with
One other thing, if we look at what rapamycin targets, and that is mTOR, and usually it is divided into two parts, mTOR complex 1 and mTOR complex 2. Some are concerned, for example, that mTOR complex 2 can be inhibited in some cases, but what's your view on that? If we take, for example, rapamycin weekly or every other week, is there any risk for mTOR complex 2 inhibition or?
So story is very interesting because it contains several topics. I don't know how to start. I will start from the end, but I should not remember to say about mTOR C2. So the reason why we promote once a week use of rapamycin is to avoid attacks from people who say rapamycin is dangerous. So we were saying, okay, we will not argue with you. Rapamycin may be poison, but we are using it in different schema than usual, and in this schedule, it has no side effect. It's true, but it has no side effects in any schedule. But it's difficult to argue with people with conflict of interest. This is my opinion. Once again, I'm telling what you will not hear from anyone, because it would be scientific explanation why this scheduler was chosen. Was chosen to avoid attacks. I was also promoter of this particular schedule. But I don't think that we really know which one is the best for particular individual, which I'm writing right now, that schedules shouldn't be the same for everyone. I might exaggerate it a little bit. Political explanation.
Yeah. No, but we can move on here. And if we look at your personal usage, you were probably one of the first person who started self-experimenting with rapamycin in the early days. When was the first time you took it, and why did you decide to start?
Well, because I was sure that it's anti-aging drug, but I really didn't know both doses and schedulers. I myself, after a while, thought that once a week is best, but maybe this is the best, but not the only one. It's somehow viewed now that it's no other ways to use rapamycin than once a week.
Yeah. But if we go to the next thing here, when you started, what was the reactions from other people when you started self-experimenting with the rapamycin?
Yeah. So some people start independently of me. I didn't advertise except close friends in the laboratory. But other people, for example, one doctor from very famous hospital, he wrote to me maybe 15 years ago that he is taking rapamycin 1 milligram once a week. Maybe this is how they started, that it should be taken once a week. I don't remember exactly. Then when it started, other people repeated, and it's become a dogma difficult to change. So he said he is not sure, is it enough or too little? And he said that no one, including his wife, knows about this because he afraid he was considered crazy. But people taking rapamycin existed 15 years ago, more secret.
Yeah, that's very interesting that they started taking it little bit parallel together with you there. So yeah.
Yeah, but I also didn't know doses or schedulers, and we still don't know. What I'm trying to say that we don't know for longevity. We know that it would be safe to take once a week, but it's also safe take 1 milligram every day. Clinical study in healthy elderly who was taking 1 milligram every day, and it was the same safe. So whatever study we will done, it will be safe.
And that is one other interesting thing which many people ask, for example, is that what is best weekly, bi-weekly, daily for longevity? And as you said, we don't really know yet. And you pointed out that we need the trials to look at what effects those regimens have on the age-related diseases. After that, we can start to better guesses.
Right, because right now everybody think about schedule and doses from point of view of side effects. And it works anyway. Once a day, every day, no side effects. When I say no side effects, I, of course, exaggerate a little bit. I mean that no dangerous side effects. I couldn't say somebody feel tired after rapamycin, that it's placebo effect or because of rapamycin, but no danger. But our goal is to delay age-related disease because this is what kills us, not side effects of rapamycin. I just want to add that taking rapamycin doesn't preclude visiting doctors and to have traditional medical care. It's very important. Rapamycin can substitute for this now. It's like additions, not substitution.
And you touched a little bit on this one. I think you have written it in some papers that if you don't get unacceptable side effects, then it's probably is the optimal dose. And if you get unacceptable side effects, then you probably need to decrease the dose. And when you say unacceptable side effects, what can an unacceptable side effect be that can be good to keep an eye on?
Yes, it was a purely practical recommendation. It's a very safe recommendation, like what Dr. Green is doing. He's trying to be on the safe side. So there is no reason to push someone to take rapamycin despite side effects. Acceptable, I would say, by this person, because I was emailed several times from a patient. Once again, I didn't do any recommendations to patients at all. I just write article, general consideration that no sense to go through unacceptable side effects. And this patient with little mutation disease which terminates lifespan young. And he had reasoning in animal studies that it can extend his lifespan. So he was not taken for aging, but for very rare condition. He was taking 20 milligram every day. And he tweeted about this, I remember. He basically had a lot of side effects, painful mouth sores, but he continued to take it because for him it was acceptable because he fighted deadly disease. So this is what I mean unacceptable. If for someone poorly emotional is unacceptable, for example, to take more than 1 milligram, it's enough reason for unacceptable for this person.
Mhm. If we go a little bit back to the combination and things, are there any supplement drugs or interventions that you think should not be combined with rapamycin?
Currently, I think that almost nothing should be combined with rapamycin for the purpose of longevity. Of course, drugs could be combined for another reason if somebody has high blood pressure, for example, of course. But purely for longevity, almost nothing was proved to be effective. Maybe Acarbose is good, something like that, but not, for example, in my mind, senolytics, because some of senolytics very toxic, some, of course, anti-cancer drugs without proven evidence the extent of spam. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. And if we look through the lens of the hyperfunction theory, if an elderly person is starting to exercise, eating lots of protein, taking testosterone therapy, and things like that, is it to put the foot on the gas, or we talked a little bit about that, but my feeling is that if you try to optimize muscle growth when we get older, then it feels like we put the foot on the gas a little bit. But it's probably better to maintain muscle than to try to be like a Olympic master in elderly age. You can build a little bit muscle, but you should not be like a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I once again, I'm expert in something, but not in everything.
Yeah, yeah. But do you think that protein decreases, for example, the effect of rapamycin if it's combined?
Personally, I like the idea of protein diet plus rapamycin. About negative effect of high protein diet is done in studies in animals in childhood. If to not to feed with protein, they in some condition can live longer, but be weaker. It's the same like rapamycin given to very young. It was no evidence that protein is bad for adults. Its effect on protein deficient diets were done in young animals and they live longer. But again, I'm not expert in
Yeah,
diet.
yeah. We touched a little bit on this before. What would you say is a good time to start taking rapamycin?
Theoretical reasons maybe after development finished. Once again, I don't want to give particular recommendations. It's expected that I will give them, but I don't want because I don't know everything. It's could be individual. So, from theoretical reasons, the earlier the better. But it could be negative effects on reproduction in man, for example. And without giving these particular recommendations, I always emphasized when I was talking on in my papers on that it should be done under supervision of doctors. For example, Alan Green, we just discussed that he is very careful. And I'm a theoretician, actually. I not consider myself as a person to develop rapamycin for clinical use. I predicted rapamycin, and I can give some reasoning that the earlier the better to start. But it could be other reason by in particular person. It could be better to start later.
Yeah. If we take a little bit the last things, we come a little bit to the current situation, which you talked a lot about in the beginning there, with the sad news that you have been diagnosed with lung cancer that has spread. I think that came as a shock for many. And is it something you will like to talk a little bit more about? I have some questions from the listeners, if we can take those. And you touched a little bit on that in the beginning, and it was that if rapamycin prevents cancer, why do people then get cancer?
Yeah. The word prevent is not exact word. It's prevent in case if person would not develop cancer anyway, or if a person would develop but die from another disease first. More correct is delay.
Yeah. Or probably also minimize risk, or
It's look the same. When, for example, animal sacrificed at different ages, they look like it's minimized risk. But these animals who was sacrificed and then doing autopsy live longer. They can develop, but later. I just don't want to go in my personal history because it's unrelated to science. I was raised and lived part-time until I was 13 in the Soviet Union, and smoking was widespread. But discuss role of smoking is trivial.
and as you said, there, if you will not have taken rapamycin, then you will probably have got the cancer faster than today.
Yes, this is my opinion. It's another question that I actively deny this possibility. But I was not like a doctor for myself. I don't want to deny something that you don't want to. And I would say that all experiments in animals show delaying of cancer. And in humans, also in organ transplant patients taking rapamycin have less cancer. And rapamycin, if you use, is anti-cancer drugs they used in clinic to treat cancer. So there is no single report that rapamycin causes cancer.
Yeah, because that was some other thing that some are a little bit concerned about, that rapamycin can promote cancer on the fasting side with the extended fasting. There is something which is called autophagy, which mTOR stimulates, and
That's like mTOR inhibits autophagy, rapamycin stimulates.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, totally correct. Good, Misha, that you pointed that out. Uh, Rapamycin stimulate autophagy and inhibits mTOR. But in the fasting community, they talk a lot of about autophagy, and I think it was 3 years ago or something like that. I read an article, and it talked quite much about it, that autophagy can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. It can, in some cases, promote cancer, but it can also prevent cancer. And it can also be used in cancer treatment in different ways.
For example, radiation can promote cancer, can treat cancer, right?
Yeah, very good point there, Misha.
But we need evidence about rapamycin that it promotes cancer. All evidence opposite. What Autophagy is doing, it's a speculation. Rapamycin is not Autophagy. It's a drug. It's easy to test. It's given to group of animals and I think for group of humans, and we will see result. By using term Autophagy, we cannot test this. So in 1907, experiments on mice treated with tobacco smoke developed lung cancer preventable by rapamycin. And it was concluded by the authors that clinical studies in smokers, former smokers, should be initiated. It was never initiated. And most important in this, that people who afraid cancer, and everyone should, they should not deny this. If you're a former smoker, why not to go for X-ray every year? No one is doing this really because we want to deny this possibility. There is completely different approaches should be not to think about autophagy, but just go and check.
Mm, yeah. And that is a good thing because the earlier things are detected, the probably easier it is to treat also.
Yes. And it's curable, curable. I'm working right now how to make it curable when this is late. It's just important not to deny this possibility. And I think that psychologically, much easier not to go to take X-ray.
Yeah, yeah. There is two things more here, Michelle, because in one recent article with the name you wrote doses and schedules of rapamycin for longevity. In one paragraph, you wrote about high intermittent doses of rapamycin, and that these high intermittent dose protocol may target more cells in the body than low dose is used. But then you also said that it can lead to a temporary mTOR overactivation afterwards. And can that overactivation lead to some harm things?
It's possibility. I just discussed this that gold standard intermittent rapamycin should be evaluated. Is it optimal to everyone or not to everyone? There's updated version. This paper was published yesterday, and I answered many questions.
Okay. And the mTOR overactivation afterwards, do you think we can, for example, press down the overactivation, for example, with other interventions like fasting or something? It's very speculative, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting, speculative. Maybe it's important to develop optimal combinations of rapamycin. I really never had this goal to develop optimal rapamycin treatment for any particular person. It's a medical problem. It should be implemented by medical institutions. My goal was not goal, it came naturally, theory of aging and some implications, predictions, but most details need to be tested exactly. I cannot predict from theory what dose your Chris will be take really.
Yeah, because it's very complex. It's my genetic, lifestyle, lots of different things that can impact the dose regimen. I can be very sensitive to pharmacological drugs. So, as you point out, the dose is very individualized thing and needs to be taken in consideration from one person to other. So it's most likely not good to just copy what someone else is doing and thinking that it will work the same way. Yeah, that's a really big takeaway from this conversation. I take.
We're discussing clinical issues too much because rapamycin not the answer to every medical questions, no, and including cancer avoidance because, uh, well, I return in my case.
Yeah. Have I missed to talk about something special that you want to lift up, Misha?
I just, once again, uh, something which was developed in cancer was detectable 32 years ago. It was never biopsy. I denied this purposely and never took look on X-rays because I was like everyone wanted to. And interesting, it was also denied to doctors. When I was telling, oh, don't pay attention on this tumor-like mass in my lung because it was many years ago, they said, oh, great, then let us forget it.
Hmm. Hmm. It's but the thing you do now is to yeah, try to find the key to solving this case and fight this cancer. And if I understand it correctly, you are also writing a book about this.
Right, because of course, I started working this to treat myself. Once again, I'm not treating myself. I have oncologists treating me, but I developing now how would be the best way to do it from all knowledge which accumulated, and I wanted it would be available to other doctors because I put a lot of thought in this now.
The same thing you did also with rapamycin. When you started, you shared it with everyone, and some liked it and some disagree with it. But you created, as I said in the beginning, a huge contribution to the rapamycin longevity field, and it feels like you're doing something now also to the cancer field to finding that key which will create that contribution.
Cancer field is my original field initially. But about clinical development of rapamycin for longevity is not what I'm doing. And there are very enthusiastic people who are doing this now. For example, Matt Camberlin and these great achievements of Dr. Alan Green who food other doctors' example. And I believe that it will be developed, but I really don't want to give particular recommendations to anyone. Just I showed complexity clinical applications and talk about some theoretical reasons. It doesn't mean that it's recommendations.
Yeah. Yeah, everything we have talked about here it's data that in some cases exist in research studies, but there is lots of guesswork and speculation also. So, and this is not by no mean any recommendation for anyone that to take a specific dose regimen or something like that. So. And as Misha also pointed out, that always do things under supervision of a physician. That is an important thing.
And I just wanted during our conversation to emphasize that there is myth or dangers of rapamycin by side effects. Real danger in our life is that rapamycin will not prevent disease. Without rapamycin, all people die historically. No. So this is the real danger. What happened to me? I developed age-related disease anyway, despite taking rapamycin. This is like danger of not rapamycin effect, but danger that it's not effective enough.
If it will not have any effect, then by taking it, it can be that it's like a placebo pill, which creates a placebo effect, and then you get some kind of positive effects through it.
Yeah, but once again, if it will have no effect on preventing life-limiting disease in particular person, what could happen that this person will rely too much on rapamycin instead of going to check X-ray, for example.
Yeah, good point there. I think we can round up this thing, and one thing I can highly recommend Misha's website where he has lots of good content. He has also a great Twitter account where he shares different publications and thoughts and things like that. And you find his research papers on PubMed, for example. And yeah, he has produced lots of great content, so I highly recommend to check it out.
I recommend PubMed publications because I put a lot of there. When I talking to my website, it's just very recent because I want to do it fast. If something happened to me, that unpublished knowledge will not disappear. And for something that I need to tell very rapidly that other can learn on my experience.
Yeah, and then you can also get feedback fast from others on the content, so yeah, that's a good strategy. It's hard to say goodbye, but take care now, my friend, and I will say never give up beating that cancer. And yeah, we are all with you and wish you the best. And as I said, if you need something from me or someone else, just let us know, and we will help you through this in different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Disclaimer: the podcast is for general information and educational purposes only, and is not medical advice for you or others. The use of information and other things linked to the podcast is at the user's own risk. Always consult your physician with anything you do regarding your health or medical conditions.